So I want to try to objectively define art if I can. I mean, I love setting standards in art. I love trying to categorize art based on whether or not they met the standards. I love trying to label different connotations in art. I love trying to decipher whether or not an artist was trying to create a certain type of art, or whether or not what the inspirations were for the art. I love trying to do that. I think trying to define those things leads to a greater appreciation of the art. I also love defining words in a very concrete way. I think the more we can objectively define words, the better. I think when we have these loose definitions of words, I think it just leads to miscommunication and confusion, misunderstanding. It's very counterproductive. So I agree with the bulk of what you're saying. I think good, bad, and evil are possibly the worst words ever. The only thing they're ever good for is propaganda.
Luke, I think your position's relatively clear, although I'm not sure how clear it is to you. You have said in your response to my video, which was a response to your video, that you're not against the setting of criteria for determining specific kinds of art. So, for example, you said that it would have been acceptable for an art critic to say that this is not impressionist art because it doesn't meet the criteria of impressionist art. Where you seem to draw the line, although I don't think you say so explicitly, is in the definition of art itself. There you would like there to be a more subjective standard, something that says that everything is capable of being art, it's all in the eye of the beholder, or at least it's in the eye of the artist. I don't think your argument holds up. That's really trying to have it both ways. You can't on the one hand say that it's logically and rationally proper to have strict criteria for what is impressionist art, and on the other hand say, but it's not acceptable to say that there's a definition for art itself. In other words, to know what is impressionist art, you not only have to know what is impressionist, but what is art. And that's where you don't want to go. Another part of your response was that, in effect, it's okay to categorize, but not to evaluate. In other words, you want to describe, but not to value, not to evaluate. Well, okay, that is a critical, that's almost the critical distinction between what you're saying and what objectivism is all about. There are three major schools of thought, if you want to put it that way, when it comes to evaluating what is the good. There's the intrinsic school, the subjective or subjectivist school, and the objective or objectivist school. The intrinsicist would say that the good is good regardless of what people think about it, regardless of what their situation in life is, regardless of what the needs or wants of the viewer are. So the intrinsicist would hold that that which is good independently of human beings and what they need and what they like and what they want, etc. So the intrinsicist sees things as good in reality independently of the human mind. What does the subjectivist say? The subjectivist says that the good is defined by the human mind independent of reality. In other words, good is whatever the individual mind considers it to be. And that's the school ultimately you're coming from. You're saying that if in my mind this is good, it's good independently of what it is in reality. In other words, independently of its qualities in the natural world, independently of how those things might reflect my values or not reflect my values, independently of whether these ideas that are expressed in art, if they are ideas, are pro-life or anti-life, independently of all of that. Just what I regard as good is good, and what you regard as good is quite possibly different than what I regard as good. reality has no bearing on anything. So intrinsicism holds that the good is defined by reality independently of the human mind, and subjectivism holds that the good is defined by the human mind independent of reality. Now, objectivism is the third school, and it holds that there's a connection, effectively, between reality and morality. And that connection has to be established with reason. So everything that is in reality implies a way that you should decide, a thing that you should do, a way that you should be. Every is implies an ought, a should, what you should do. So if you have a match in your hand, and your very survival depends upon this match remaining dry, and you're in a boat, then that implies, that's the is, okay, that you're in a boat, you're surrounded by water, and that you hold a dry matchstick in your hand. That state of facts, those facts about reality, dictate what you should do if your standard is to live. Okay? So reality, there are certain facts of reality, and there's certain facts about your own needs, and it's those two things together which determine what you need to do, what you need to decide, and how you need to act. The good in this case would be holding the match perhaps above your head where it won't get wet. That would be the right course of action. That would be the good. The bad would be reaching down and putting the match in the water. Why? Well, because your life depended upon that match being usable, and as soon as you put the match in the water, assuming it's not, waterproof match, a regular match, if you put it in the water, that's it for you, because under this fact scenario, you needed that match in order to continue living. Here you see in the objectivist situation that there are a set of facts, and there's yourself, the actor. And it's the interaction of the two that determines what is the good. Well, the same thing happens in art. There is what art is in reality, which is to say there is the thing that you're looking at and what it represents in reality. And there's also you, the viewer. And you, the viewer, if you are to survive, have to make certain decisions in your life. You have to make decisions. You have to make decisions that are consistent with living on this earth, and part of living is pursuing happiness. Now think of the three schools of, good. What is the good? Think of those three schools in the context of art. The intrinsicist says it's good because it's red, and anything that's red is good. Why? Because it's red. Well, who said red is good? The Bible. An elf that came and told me. It was written on the wall of the cave when I was born, and therefore it's true. Mummy told me. Any number of reasons why you might come to believe that things that are red are art, period. Okay? That's the intrinsicist. It's red, therefore it's art. Then there's a subjectivist school of value. The subjectivist school of valuing art. And the subjectivist would say, look man, it's art if I think it's art. I might think it's art because that's the way I feel, or that's just, my opinion. I don't know where it comes from, but that's just the way it is. I like it. Usually emotional, very subjective. It's certainly not grounded on anything in terms of, the facts of reality. So the subjectivist would say, well, that what's art for one person is not necessarily art for the other. Well, that's to say that art has no definition in the objective world, in reality. Now, if that's true, if everything is potentially art, then nothing is potentially art, is it? If a word means anything, then a word means nothing. If art means anything, then art means nothing. If everything is art, then nothing is art. But quite independently of that, keep in mind that aesthetics, what is art, is at the pinnacle or the final stage of a hierarchy of philosophical beliefs, if you will. There's metaphysics, the philosophy of what there is out there, what is the nature of reality. There's epistemology, which builds upon that, and that says, how do I know what is the nature of reality? Is it by means of reason, by means of divine revelation, by means of us all getting together and just sort of consenting that, well, this is how reality is? And upon that base of metaphysics and epistemology is an ethical code. What decisions should I make in order to live life on this earth? And upon that set of ethics and that epistemology and that metaphysics is based your politics. How should I interact with others? And upon all of that is your artistic expression. That expression of everything you believe, right down to the core, right down to your most basic beliefs about reality. That is at the top, the last step in the logical hierarchy that starts with the nature of reality, continues with the way you know about reality, continues with how you should act within your life, continues with how you should interact with others, and finally expresses itself as art. The expression of all of that, your view of the world and how it is, and also the view of how the world ought to be, how it would be in a state of perhaps perfection. And that's why if you look at a person's art, you can determine a whole heck of a lot about their underlying politics, their ethics, their epistemology, and their metaphysics, whether they realize it or not. When they put paint to canvas, when they put notes to page, when they put chisel to stone, the artists are expressing what they hold either implicitly or explicitly in their mind to be their views on the nature of the world and how it ought to be, or how it is. And how they view the world is a result of their beliefs, their metaphysical, epistemological, ethical, and political beliefs. When we ask what is art, ultimately then we're asking, well, what is a reflection of my philosophy? And Rand's art was rooted in her underlying philosophy. The metaphysics is, the world really exists independently of any particular viewer. It's the same for everyone. This isn't all in your head. Her epistemology held that reason is the only means by which a person can obtain knowledge about the facts of reality and about how to live in that reality. Her morality held that a man's own life is his highest value, that his own personal happiness is his highest purpose, and that rationality is the only way to pursue that. Her politics was founded on the idea that rational behavior is consensual behavior. She held in effect that it is wrong to circumvent another person's rational faculty, to undermine their consent by doing such things as stealing behind their back or using force to take something from them. These are all ways of shortchanging reason, but not only the other person's reason, it's a way of living without being rational. And when you live without being rational, when you try and survive without being rational, what you're doing is making other people your means of survival, and when you do that, you're dependent upon them. Your whole survival depends on their survival. I would submit to you that you're ultimately evaluating what is art according to the subjectivist school. That reality has nothing to do with it, It's what's in the mind that matters, the mind of the viewer, or the mind of the person creating the art, and solely what's in the mind. That's more or less where you're coming from at this point in time. And that's pretty contemporary. That's pretty much how the whole world views things, or at least how the Western world right now views things in movies, in music, etc. You will see an overwhelming trend against the idea of absolute reality. Subjectivism reigns supreme. Nothing's good, nothing's evil. Nothing can be judged to be good or evil, and therefore nobody can be judged to be good or evil. In fact, nobody's art can be judged to be good or evil. It's a very contemporary view. I think it's entirely wrong, and that it's probably the result. I mean, we are largely the product of what we choose to learn, and if you've absorbed a lot of what you've learned from, well, most university professors, or from just the popular music and art around you, then it wouldn't be surprising that you would end up being a moral subjectivist.
I made a video about Ayn Rand, saying that Ayn Rand and Objectivism basically limits artistic creativity and is very corrosive to the art community, and I stand by that claim. I have not read anything by Ayn Rand.
One of the things you raised was that if there are objective ways to determine what is art and what is not art, then that limits you somehow to repeating past expressions of art or past expressions of style. I don't think that's true at all. Whether your philosophy is intrinsicist or subjectivist or objectivist, your modes of expression are not any more limited in one than in another view. There's a difference between the medium and the message. Whether you're an objectivist, a subjectivist, or an intrinsicist, the media are unlimited. You can use any form of medium. You can use any level of abstraction. It's the idea that's important, the idea that you're communicating, or the range of ideas. It's what you're portraying, the message you're sending that is important. And there you are limited. So the message should be limited, but not the expression of it. So I think there's two things going on here. When you're talking about Rand and her objectivist philosophy, you're talking about an integrated philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics. And an objectivist artist has a way of viewing the world, and they express that view in an unlimited number of ways. But they do have a view. They have an opinion. That same thing is true for subjectivists. When you look at subjectivist art, what they never express, what they're limiting themselves from saying, is that there's any value in the world. The subjectivist, in his art, effectively denies the importance of reality. The intrinsicist, in his art, effectively denies the value of the human mind. And the objectivist, in his art, effectively says that value, art, requires the mind to be applied to the facts of reality, and it must have a purpose: human happiness. In short, whether you're an objectivist or a subjectivist or an intrinsicist, you have no more or no less to say in any one of those fields. In each of those fields, you will not be saying what the other two fields are saying. So the subjectivist will not be expressing in his art intrinsicism or objectivism. The intrinsicist will not be expressing in his art subjectivism or objectivism. And the objectivist will not be expressing in his art subjectivism or intrinsicism. But all three, the intrinsicist, the subjectivist, and the objectivist, will have an unlimited number of ways to express their philosophy, an unlimited access and use of media. It would be wrong to conclude that objectivism is in any way more limiting than subjectivism or intrinsicism. They are all neglecting one another, and they all should.